Hey guys, we're here with Matt today. He's got a 05 dually that we're about to dyno. He's got Smarty tuning on it now. He just put a D&J stage 2 head on it, and we're going to be doing some little bit different dyno tuning today. We're going to be seeing how much power we can make at sustained towing power. I'm guessing he's going to be around the 400 horsepower mark with what he's got now. We're going to see if we can, he doesn't want to go over 1200 degrees EGTs when he's towing mountains, doing hot shot work, that kind of stuff. So we'll probably also, we're going to turn it up. This is HP tuners. We'll probably also see what we can make max power. This is stock injector, stock CP3. It's got a S300. Who did you say built that turbo?
Works Turbo out of Pelham, Alabama.
Okay, and that's a 63, 68,
yes.
waste-gated 080 on a Steed Speed manifold. You have a Banks intake horn.
Banks intercooler.
Banks intercooler, fast 150, South Bend clutch. That's pretty much it. Mishimoto radiator, Flexolite fans. We're going to run it on the Smarty to start off with and see what kind of power we're making. We're going to do like a 2200 RPM hold, see what power it makes at what EGT, and then we're going to do a full power sweep from like 2000 RPM to 3500 on the Smarty tuning, and then we're going to switch it over to HP, and we're going to play around with some of the different timing curves, see if we can make more sustained power when we're doing a hold at 2200 RPM along with some max power. So stay tuned, we'll see what we can do today. Okay, we got the first baselines done. This was on Smarty. This is a SO6 level 5 with timing, and it made a peak power of 428 horsepower. That was at 3200 RPM. You can see the power curve here. We did two different runs. The red curve on the dyno graph, that is the full power sweep from 2300 RPM to 3600 RPM. You can see it fall off in the data log. We can see the Smarty start defueling right around 3000 RPM. Then we did a second hold that was like it was about a 30-second pull that we ran from 1900 RPM to 2300 RPM because that's his average towing window. And we saw a peak of 1200 degrees EGTs and a peak of 365 horsepower at 2300 RPM. But below 2000 RPM, we saw a peak of 319 horsepower. And that you can really see in the torque curve where our peak power is. This is where the turbo starts becoming efficient. In right around 2200 RPM is where his peak efficiency is with the turbo. So it gives him a better idea when he's towing what the good target RPM is to hit for best power and still maintain EGTs. So we're 365 horsepower at 2300 RPM, and we're going to take the Smarty back to stock. We'll put HP tuners on it and see if we can make more power, more torque while maintaining 1200 degrees EGTs. So it's kind of a fun day. Not often that we just we do little tests like this. Normally it's just about peak power, but this is about usable power. Okay, this is now with HP tuners. We've actually commanded less fuel quantity injector pulse width than the Smarty does. The Smarty was about 2350 US, and this is at 2300. But we've added some rail pressure. The Smarty was at right at 20,000 psi, and we bumped that up to 25,000 psi. And then we've also corrected the timing curve to try to make more power. So we're ending up with about the same fuel quantity, but we're doing it in a shorter window because of by adding pressure and shortening up the injector pulse width. But look, we're doing this really hard load from 1900 RPM to 2300 RPM because that's the main power window for towing. And you can see with the HP tune that we put in, we picked up about 25 horsepower through the curve. But once we get to 2100 RPM, the power falls flat and it comes down and matches the Smarty curve. So I'm looking at the data log, and I can see from 2100 RPM to 2200 RPM, I've increased the timing 3 degrees, and that's where the the power curve falls flat. So I'm going to come back in the tune file, and we're going to correct the timing curve and correct it down. I'm going to pull about 3 degrees of timing out of it at 2200 RPM and see if I can maintain this increased power curve all the way out. And we were seeing about 50 degrees less EGTs than we were with the Smarty. And that's from the added timing. We're trying to get all that fuel quantity in before top dead center to make the fuel burn as efficiently as possible. Okay, we fired it up after that last flash, and it sounded like it was missing. It sounded like it was down a cylinder. And it has injector number 5 circuit open. So I'm going to pull the valve cover and see if by chance there's a loose wire on the injector solenoid. If not, and then it would probably indicate a solenoid problem on the injector. So we will see what we find. After we got the rocker box off, we found that this rubber seal in the injector harness was folded over, and that was keeping the injector harness from plugging all the way in, and that's where we were getting our cylinder number 5 misfire. It's kind of a random thing. He has like 8,000 miles on the truck without touching it, and then on the dyno it acts up. But it was a simple fix. We were able to pop this out, put a new rubber O-ring in there, put it back together, and everything worked. Okay, on this last run we did a max power pull, and it did a max of 512 horsepower, but look at the power curve. We were making really good power, 2800 RPM, it just fell off. The power fell way off. If we look at our data log, we see that rail pressure dropped from 26,000 all the way down to 21,000. And we started looking after the run, and I remembered that I had pulled the lift pump relay to flash the truck, so it didn't crash the flash, and I forgot to put it back in. So that was with no fast fuel system. So I'm going to put the relay back in and run this same run again, and we're going to see what we make. Okay, now we're going to try a 1900 RPM to 2300 RPM wide open throttle hold on the hot tune. This is the tune that did 532 max power at 3,000 RPM. So we're just going to see if he'd be towing with this setup, and he goes full throttle, how hot would it get? Okay, I'm going to try to recap what we learned today. I'm going to start with 428 horsepower was the Smarty tune, and this was the red curve that you see here that defueled. We then took the same base quantity. It went with a little shorter injector pulse width, but we added rail pressure and adjusted a timing curve, and we were able to make the same power curve. This is the purple line here, which is 442 horsepower with less fuel. Made the same power, actually made more peak, but down here in the tow range, we made pretty much the exact same power, but 50 degrees less EGTs. We're 1,150 degrees on a hold instead of 1,200 degrees on a hold like we were on the Smarty. Then we increased the fuel quantity. We did it hold from 1,900 RPM to 2,300 RPM with a peak of 416 horsepower, crossing the 400 horsepower mark at 2,150 RPM, and that was right at 1,200 horsepower. So we pretty much increased 50 usable horsepower at the same 1,200 degree EGT as what we were on the Smarty. And then you can also see what it did with torque. The Smarty curve was like 750 foot-pounds of torque, and here we are like 875 foot-pounds of torque. So we increased power, basically using the same amount of fuel quantity, just more efficiently. That same power, we did a max power run of 484 horsepower on that tow tune. That is the tune that I'm going to send him out of here today, but I'm also going to give him a hot tune that he can turn it up if he wants to. We did a max power of 532 horsepower on the hot tune. We were struggling a little bit with rail pressure. We did accidentally make a run without the fuel pump relay plugged in. So without a fast fuel system plugged in, no lift pump at all, it did 512 horsepower. You can see the power curve here. It really fell down, dropped almost 50 horsepower at 3,500 RPM. But these two lines here, 512 horsepower versus 532, is the difference between a lift pump and no lift pump. We also took this hot tune max effort, and we did the same 1,900 to 2,300 RPM hold to see what the EGTs would get to, and we did about a 15-second wide open throttle hold, and the EGTs seemed to hit a wall and stabilize around 1,400 degrees, which that would be in danger zone. You risk melting the piston, but it did cross 450 horsepower at 2,150 RPM. To wrap it up, we were really focusing on the 1,900 to 2,300 RPM window. 1,200 degree EGT max. We can make 400 horsepower at 2,150 RPM and maintain 1,200 degrees. If we go up to 450 horsepower at the same RPM, we pick up about 200 degrees EGTs with this S300 that's on here. So if he wants to be able to sustain 450 or 500 horsepower, he's going to have to go to a compound turbo setup and add more air for the same amount of fuel quantity.